So for this week's teleseminar, we decided to tackle a rather deeper, more complex topic, which is the rise of alternative currencies, which explicitly Bitcoin as one manifestation, I think provides a great kind of convergence point between some of the stuff we talk about in terms of social capital, in terms of social economy, in terms of reputation, and the way that it is increasingly becoming a conscious aspect of our online activities. But yet a parallel track to all of this is actual currency, actual things you can buy and sell with. And Bitcoin is one that seems to have a trajectory that's quite considerable, that it's growing at a rate that represents both the volatility I think it has, but also, again, to come back to this notion of it's difficult to understand. I mean, it's one of these internet phenomena that I think just attracts the curious. Because, on the surface, I have to admit, the reason I wanted to do today's seminar as a kind of interview format is even though I've been reading a ton of material on it, I'm not sure I fully understand how Bitcoin works. So let's start this off on a basic level, and we'll do it as a kind of back and forth. But Ken, why don't you start us off with what is Bitcoin and what is it about it that attracted you?
So Bitcoin is a virtual currency. It's online only. It's just basically a bunch of encrypted numbers is basically what it comes down to. But these numbers all have to match each other, and the only way to match two numbers up is through doing the same type of encryption that protects your banking session on the internet. And that is only safe because the calculations to break it are incredibly hard. So what they've done is they've actually made it slightly easier than the bank encryption. But you just have to trial and error through trillions of numbers to find it. Now that would be if you only had one laptop and it was you running, it would take you a million years to find it. But what's happened is that there's hundreds of thousands of people at this point. The difficulty is increasing in finding these coins, and it takes the whole network.
But the idea is just like traditional currency that would have a unique number. Each of these coins has a unique number.
Yes.
That's been generated essentially using strong encryption.
Right, so but it's not like, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're not in order. It's like numbers that are like
crazy random.
200 digits long.
Right.
And there's 6 million in circulation now, so out of a possible 200 digits long, that's an incredibly small amount. You can't just guess one because it just wouldn't be valid.
And because of the encryption, each one can be verified. So it's not like you could make one up and make up a crazy string of letters and say, here's my Bitcoin.
No, it's verifiable. It's easy to verify, but very hard to generate. So to generate one that makes the verification work is very, very hard.
And why is it hard to generate? Just because there isn't enough computational power?
Well, the way that it was designed is that it's like all currencies are, and a lot of people that I've talked to recently, and I'm going to actually get out of my depth, so I'm going to rely on people who are a little better read than I am in terms of economic and monetary political theory. All currencies in the world are by fiat. The only reason that we agree that a $5 Canadian bill or American bill is worth $5 is because we all agree on it. And we figure that even if you don't agree on it, I can take it to someone else and they'll probably agree on it. And they'll probably agree it's worth $5.02 or $4.98, something like that. We're pretty sure that no one's going to say, thanks for your $100 bill, I'll count that as a 20. We all know that the American dollar, so far, before it collapses. Now, other currencies, of course, have collapsed. And that's where people say, no, your $100 is worth 20 today, and you have that's inflation.
But this is the idea of an internet currency that's not tied to a national government. That's not tied to the policies of a particular government, but tied just to computational resources.
Well, let me get into that. So the way they did it is if you create a virtual currency online that's just created by fiat, people can just say, okay, I created another $200 for myself. I printed some money. In some circles, we call that quantitative easing too, which is also known as printing money, which is what the U.S. government is doing right now. But you can't just do that because the way that it's a peer-to-peer network and the way that it is set up is such that these coins all have to match the cryptographic signatures. And it's very, very hard to match a coin to its cryptographic signature. You have to generate both sides of it. One side's very easy for the verification, everybody can use it. The other side's very, very hard for it to be generated. So what they did when they started is they had a couple hundred computers or maybe at most participants, and they made the difficulty so that coins would always be generated about 50 Bitcoin dollars, for whatever that's worth, not necessarily American dollar, Canadian dollar, they just call them Bitcoin dollars. 50 Bitcoin dollars would be generated about every 10 minutes by the network. And what happens is the peer-to-peer network measures the output of the network to make sure that if people calculate it in 9.2 minutes, it's a little too fast. And if that happens successively over several iterations, eventually after a few days, it'll see the rates getting faster and faster. The whole network will dynamically recalculate and say, all right, we're making the coin calculation a little bit harder to make it take 10 minutes instead of 8.5.
And what do you mean by the network? Like
it's a peer-to-peer network.
So literally everyone runs their own little client
Yep.
that contributes to the larger generation of the currency.
Well, there's
does
two
that
parts
mean-
of it. There's the wallet, which just allows you to speak peer-to-peer to the network and just transmit and receive messages and be part of the network. I run one. I don't have the right equipment to calculate coins. I'll get into that later. But I just run one just to keep the network alive.
And by wallet, I mean this is literally a digital wallet. It's what stores your Bitcoins.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's connected in real time to the Bitcoin marketplace.
Yes, it is. It's sending back and forth all the communications that people are sending and trading blocks to say, I see this new coin has come on the market. Everybody start verifying it and make sure it's real. Everybody starts verifying. The whole network talks to each other, and this side says I verified, that side says I verified, and you actually wait and you can see how long. You can follow this off. It's totally auditable. The whole thing is in the clear. Everybody can see each coin is signed by the next person who's verified it, so you can see all the people who have verified the coin, and you can see that if there's trust been broken, if you have the right tools, it'll be a lot of research, but they're writing tools now to go through that audit trail. This is beyond what modern currency would ever have attached, and the U.S. government, I'll try to remember to say it later, would love this stuff because there's a paper trail, literally, or like bit trail,
but
goes all the way back to the creation of that dollar.
Well, let's take a tangent there. I mean, some of the hype that's been associated with Bitcoin is that it's anonymous. But perhaps that's not the case. Perhaps it's quite the opposite, that it's an online currency. It's an autonomous currency, but it is very much subject to surveillance, subject to tracking because of the transparency of every single transaction that's used with any element of the currency.
Right, but of course your identifying marks are not on the dollars, and you don't sign your name on it. The only thing that governments could do, and I'm sure they do, they already do this with all your email and everything else, so they sniff your packets at your ISP, and there's a Canadian bill on the shelf, which I'm hoping we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks, talking about ISPs requiring to surveil their customers. So with enough access points and network points, since the traffic is encrypted, the coins themselves are encrypted, but which coins you're sending to each other is not encrypted. I can see you sent coin, whatever, 200 digit long. I can see the identifier. I can see it went from this guy at this IP to this guy. Actually, you can't see who received it. The only person who can receive it is the person who can unlock, because each coin when it's so there's, let me get into transactions for a second. Transactions are done by broadcasting it onto the network. You say, I give this coin away to this secret number. Now, no one knows who has the opening key for the closing key of the secret number. All people see is the locking key. There's two keys.
But it's a public act. It's like you're in this big,
it's completely public.
Big safety deposit box room, and you tell everybody, I'm about to put a coin into this safety deposit box.
Whoever has the key.
But no one knows who actually has the key to that
Right.
safety deposit box.
Right. And you can't just watch it and see who unlocks it, because everybody gets that broadcast, and they can keep it for years and not act on it, not do anything with it. There's no unlocking. The only time it's unlocked is when it gets sent to the next person. So everybody just receives it. The only time, nothing ever happens to it. So you can't see the unlocking action. The only time it ever has to be unlocked is when, say, if I got a coin from someone else, if I keep it for 2 years and then I give it to you, the only way that you would know is I have to unlock it to allow your key. For me to send it to your key, I have to unlock it and lock it with yours. And that's the only time it ever happens. So it can be very, very difficult. It's an incredibly hard computation project for the government, even with all their network surveillance. It's possible. And you can just overlay this on top of stuff like Tor, which is an anonymous proxy.
Well, and that's the sort of news example that came up around this site Silk Road, which is a marketplace for illegal narcotics that uses Tor, which is the anonymization software, and then Bitcoin as the currency for these drug deals.
Right.
And I mean, it's interesting that article ends by saying exactly what we're discussing. That law enforcement could, at the source, monitor the hashtag, monitor the digital fingerprint, as it were, and track that to the Bitcoin transaction to prove that someone made the purchase.
Yeah.
But could you speculate a little on what other applications you could see of this currency?
Oh, I can see lots. I was just listening right now to the radio. Actually, it's so topical. I should have messaged you because it's such an excellent talk. It was Bill Moyers talking to Boston University. It was on alternative radio on CUT, which I just happened to turn on and it accompanied my drive. Excellent talk about how this is so germane to our topic, about how the banking industry has fixed the market and got their bailouts and everything else by control and manipulation of currency, by having captured Congress and they run the federal banks, the Federal Reserves. So it's very germane. And then at the end of the program, they said, if you'd like to make a donation, blah, blah, blah. I was thinking, you know what, I would happily pay $1 or $2 to have listened to this. And they say, call this number, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh man, I'm driving on a pen, blah, blah, blah. I can't sit here and do this. If I had an iPhone app, and I do text in the car a little bit, I admit, I could just, if they gave a hash of some kind, I could just send them a coin really easily from my iPhone or my smartphone or whatever.